It's August 19th, 2006, and I'm in Las Vegas at a craps table with Drew Carey and the Improv All-Stars. What? This is From the Vault. Thanks for joining me. I'm David Bergman. If it's your first time here, welcome. I've been a professional photographer for 30 years now, mostly working in music and sports with a bunch of other cool clients thrown in along the way. Each week on this show, I'm pulling an interesting image or set of images out of my archive, and I'm going to tell the behind-the-scenes story of how the picture came to be. I'm also offering signed fine art prints of those images every week exclusively at davidbergmanphoto.com, so I hope you'll go check that out. So let's jump back to 2005 when I actually got to meet comedian Drew Carey. I met him, of all places, on the sidelines of a soccer match. I was covering Major League Soccer. DC United was playing host to the English Premier League champions, Chelsea, at FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland, and I was working for Sports Illustrated. Now, Drew Carey had been seen on the sidelines all year long at soccer matches, actually working as a professional photographer. He was carrying a lot of big equipment and he was shooting like all the other photographers were. He had the right credentials and nobody really knew what was going on. I had seen some talk on some of the sports shooter message boards at the time, and everybody was kind of confused by this. So Sports Illustrated was actually doing a little sidebar on him being at these games. And so they asked me to make a quick picture of him while I was there also covering the game. So I met him before the match and I, got chatting with him. And the thing is, he had spent many years before that as the executive producer of two big shows, The Drew Carey Show and Whose Line Is It Anyway? And he was kind of in between projects at the time. Photography was something that always interested him. He actually said if he wasn't a comedian, he would have been a sports photographer, which I thought was really cool. So obviously I was working for Sports Illustrated. He was happy to chat with me. He actually got excited and wanted me to help teach him to be a better sports photographer. So I did my job there. Of course, I made a quick portrait of him on the sideline. I used an off-camera speed light and just had somebody probably hold it and just blasted that in there to get a little directional light and make that picture of him. And then I also, of course, took the opportunity to make a picture with him because I didn't know if I would ever see him again. But like I said, he was really interested in becoming a better sports photographer. One of the things I really love about Drew is that he actually took it seriously. He wasn't just on the sidelines because it was fun. Ooh, I get to be on the sidelines, right? He really was interested in learning the craft of photography. So I was absolutely willing to help him, of course, as best I could. And pretty soon, over the next couple of months, I worked with him a bit. He actually flew to New York at some point and we shot a couple things together. And the next thing I knew, I found myself on a tour bus with Drew and the Improv All-Stars. Now, this was this touring improv show that he was doing with an incredible cast. And he hired me to actually shoot these shows for him. Now, the way the show worked was Drew would do about 15 or 20 minutes of stand-up, and then he would introduce the cast. And when I talk about this cast, they are some of the best improv comedians in the world. And I mean, we're talking about Ryan Stiles, Sean Masterson, Charles Esten, who of course is now mostly known as for his role on the show Nashville. This was before that show, of course. Jeff Davis was there. Katthy Kinney, who was Mimi on the Drew Carey Show, Jonathan Mangum, who's on Let's Make a Deal. They had musician Laura Hall with them, and then Greg Proops, who is really one of the funniest and smartest people I know. He actually has a podcast called The Smartest Man in the World, which is very appropriate for Greg. But the show itself is a funny, silly show. Of course, it's all improv. It's very much like Whose Line Is It Anyway? And again, these guys are all friends. They've been working together a long time, so they can kind of anticipate what they're going to say before they say it. It's really fascinating to watch how their brains work. But Drew had hired me to go on that tour. He didn't need pictures of himself. He's such a generous guy and a gracious guy that he wanted the cast to have pictures of themselves for their websites. This was 2005. It was before social media, so they all had early versions of websites, and they just needed pictures. So he paid out of his own pocket for me to come out and do that. So of course I did that, and that's a lot of fun shooting the shows. But if you know anything about me by now, I'm always pushing to do more than that. So of course I'm going to photograph behind the scenes and do all that kind of stuff. But also, if I have the opportunity, I always want to make portraits, because portraits, for you photographers out there, it's one of those things where it's harder to do than sort of traditional event photography. making great concert pictures and live pictures is a skill unto itself. But if you can also make portraits, it's going to help you to get more work, because there are not as many photographers who are confident in making actual lit portraits. So once you learn how to do that and can add that to your repertoire, it's going to make you more valuable to your clients. So I'm always trying to use the opportunity when I have celebrities and people like this where I can make portraits of them. I'm going to push for that. So the next year, we were at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, and the cast were performing, and I was talking to Drew backstage, and I just mentioned off the cuff, like, hey, we should do a portrait of the whole cast at a craps table. You know, we're at a casino. And he was like, yeah, sure, we'll do it tomorrow if it's okay with the casino. So of course, then I went to the casino management, and I said, oh, Mr. Carey would like to do a portrait of the cast, and they said, well, if it's okay with Mr. Carey, it's okay with us. So, you know, it's like playing your mother and father against each other. Well, mom said it's okay if it's okay with you, you know, and you know, needless to say, it was okay with everybody. So the next day, they actually cordoned off an area in the casino for me to set up, and you know, they put up stanchions and people were starting to gather. They didn't really know what was going on. And then when Drew arrived, he got there first, and he really was playing craps. I guess he enjoys playing. And so he put real money down and, you know, put his money where his mouth is. For the photographers out there, I had a couple of lights. I was probably using my Dynalite Studio strobes at the time. And I had those set up, and I was trying to balance the ambient light with the strobes. It's a bit of a delicate balance, and sometimes I probably had too much ambient and sometimes not enough, but that was my goal, because I wanted that background ambient light to still be there without having to light the whole casino. So I'm using the Canon 1D Mark II, which was the state of the art at the time. I'm at 100 ISO at f6.3 at a quarter of a second shutter speed. So that's for the photographers out there. Now, once the cast started to show up, it was really fun because Laura Hall didn't know how to play, so Drew was showing her how to play. He was teaching her the game. It's actually a really complicated game if you know anything about craps. And then once everybody was there, my philosophy for these kinds of pictures is I don't really want to over direct them. These are creative, artistic people. They're obviously hysterical. So I just want to create the environment. I want to set the parameters where I'm lit and I'm set up and sort of create a scene, and then let them do their thing, let them go nuts. So by putting them in there, then I could just back off and let it happen and just shoot, right? So I made pictures. Obviously, like I said, they all know each other. They've been performing together for years, so they were just having a blast. They were actually playing craps and winning and losing, and it was a blast. And then I wanted to get sort of a low angle where, sort of the angle where maybe the dice would be like the dice's point of view. And so they wouldn't let me put the camera right down on the felt. Obviously, it's a working casino, and they don't want me to damage anything. So I had to kind of hold it with one hand, sort of hover it a little bit. But I was able to get a few frames that way. And then eventually, I did have them pose for me. I directed them a little bit at the end just to get some different things. At one point, I actually had them act like Drew had won all the money and they all lost everything, and how they would feel about that. And they all sort of made this face of disdain and disgust, right? And I just love how everybody's got their own expression, and Drew is just having a blast. It's almost like The Last Supper a little bit, with everybody kind of looking in at him. So that actually is my favorite frame from that whole shoot. So it was a blast to do. And I continued to work with Drew over the following years, more tours. I worked with him on, he did a game show called Power of 10 briefly. I got to work with him on that. And then when he got the Price is Right gig, I got to go out there and work with him on that when he first got the gig as well. So thank you, Drew, for your friendship. I hope you go back out and shoot again. I know he's been pretty busy, obviously, with Price is Right. So he's actually a very good photographer. And like I said, he takes it seriously and studies the craft and did a pretty good job as a sports photographer. So Drew, I hope you pick it up again and get back out there and shoot. Again, there are fine art prints available. I'm going to make that picture, that Last Supper photograph, available as a fine art print, 11 by 14. I'm signing it, hand signing it, printing it on really beautiful gallery quality matte paper. So you can check that out at davidbergmanphoto.com. And the other pictures from this show, the ones that I've already done, are still up there as well. And I'll be adding every week as I do more. So like I said, I'm pulling a new picture out of the vault every week. I hope you come back and join me next time. I'll have a new image right here from the vault.